You're listening to A Word With on WVCD 96.5 FM and 790 AM, a space for thoughtful conversations with visiting speakers where ideas continue long after the lecture ends. Because the most important part of the conversation is what happens next. This is A Word With.
Hello, everybody. My name is Clarence Jones, and today I am having a word with
Reverend Justice Hill.
Reverend Hill, thank you so very much for joining me here today. Of course, you were here on campus speaking with the community of Voorhees and also the local community. What were some of the things that you talked about?
Yeah, so the message that I talked about today, the title was Finish Your Story. And in this message, I took it from Mark chapter 8, when Jesus tells the disciples that he must suffer, be rejected, die, and later be resurrected. So really in this message, I encourage the students to finish their story in the sight of all that, amidst all that's going on in the world, all of the injustice, all of the people who are trying to discourage them from reaching their dreams. Really encourage them to continue the good fight of faith and to continue to be all that God has called them to be here at Voorhees University. I understand that this was the honors chapel service, so these students are phenomenal students who have bright futures. So I really just wanted to speak to that, but also I wanted to get a little deeper in knowing that just because they are honors students, it doesn't mean that everything is going perfect for them, that they could be honors students and still be hurting. They could be honors students who are, you know, in public, they seem like they have it all together, but behind the scenes possibly still be struggling. But I wanted to encourage them to continue to find hope in Jesus Christ and continue to just continue to stand amidst everything that is going on. So it was a amazing opportunity to get to meet with them and speak with them. And I'm very grateful for Voorhees University.
Now, you know, before we go on and speak more about it, because I want to get into it, because this was a great speech that, a great sermon, I would say, that you presented to the Voorhees crowd and community. But first and foremost, please let the WVCD listening audience know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Justice Hill. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, born and raised. So the first early part of my life, I grew up in Columbia, and I went to Richland School District 2. So I went to Rice Creek Elementary over there off of Hardscrabble Road. And then from there, I went to E.L. Wright Middle School for 6th and 7th grade. And then around the middle of my 7th grade year, I transferred to Heathwood Hall Episcopal School from 7th and 8th grade over there near the University of South Carolina, and then went on to graduate from Heathwood Hall for high school. And after graduating from Heathwood, I went to St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri, where I majored in political science and American studies. I was grateful, for my time at St. Louis University. I joined Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated there. I also was a top 18 graduate of my university and was the speaker at my college commencement ceremony. So it was a phenomenal experience. And then after graduating from St. Louis University, I went to Duke Divinity School in Durham, North Carolina, where I had focuses in preaching, Black church studies, and Baptist studies. And while at Duke Divinity, I served as the young adult minister at St. Joseph AME Church in Durham, North Carolina. I also served as the assistant chaplain for the Duke University football team, and I was the president of the Black Seminarians Union. And Duke was a phenomenal experience for me. And I graduated in May of 2025. And then from there, I moved to the DMV area in the, DC, Maryland area to serve as the online minister at Alfred Street Baptist Church. So my role now, I oversee the social media, the YouTube channel, all this stuff to continue to have our online membership engaged with everything that's going on at Alfred Street. But I am so grateful. I'm 26, so I'm just excited for what God has in store and for all that God is doing in my life.
Now, at that young of age, what made you go to the calling to say, yes, I'm going to spread the word throughout this world?
Wow, that is a deep, deep question. So for me, I grew up in the church. Both of my grandfathers are pastors. But my grandfather, Reverend Edward Lewis Hill Sr., and then my grandfather who passed away in 2020, Reverend John Preacher. And I also attended Brooklyn Baptist Church in Columbia, South Carolina, under the Reverend Dr. Charles B. Jackson Sr. And from a young age, I really found peace in the church. The church was really where I found my voice, where, giving the Easter speeches when Easter came around. I know Easter's coming up, serving in children's church, Sunday school, all that good stuff. And I can say that I was really, really, really encouraged by the church to, be all that God had called me to be. I can remember from a young age sitting in church and, as a young boy, just clapping my hands and standing on my feet, praising God. At the time, not fully knowing what I was doing, I was really imitating what I saw. But as I continued to grow older, I gathered a deeper understanding of, what it is that was taking place. So at the age of 11, I was baptized at Brooklyn Baptist Church. And, from there, God continued to move in my life, even, as I was navigating elementary, middle, and high school. My initial passion, right, I did a lot of public speaking, a lot of oratorical contests, speech contests, and debate. My initial plan was to go to law school and become an attorney. I had interned at various, law firm. My first job actually was at the Fifth Judicial Court Solicitor's Office in Columbia, South Carolina. So that was like my first job. So I was in the courtroom, hanging with the attorneys, doing all that stuff. So that was my plan. And then everything honestly changed in 2020. So at the time, I was preparing for the LSAT, because I was in college at that time. I'd already interned at various firms. So after my freshman year of college, I did an internship. It's really a summer fellowship program at the University of Alabama Law School, and I did an amazing job there. They actually named me the best oral advocate from my work in the courtroom. But then in 2020, that's the year of COVID, of course, and we were inside the house. A lot was going on. And then also around that time, my grandfather passed away. And, we were extremely close. He was a, pastor and everything. Like, that was one of my granddad, but he was also one of my best friends. So, around that time, I was like reflecting, like, do I really want to do the law school thing now? I knew from a young age that I had a calling. Like, even, when I was 16, I gave my first sermon at my granddad's church, my papa's church, Reverend Edward Lewis Hill Sr. at Friendship AME. And, that was my first sermon. And literally both of my grandfathers were there. So my papa was on my right side, and my granddad, who passed away, was on my left side, and I was in the middle. And, that day I stood and I spoke, and the Spirit of God moved in the sanctuary, and, it was a blessed experience. And then shortly thereafter, people were coming up to me saying, you want to do this law thing, but you have a calling. Like, you need to really preach and, pastor and lead in the church. At the time, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But that wasn't really my passion at that time. But as I continued to grow, I was like, this, like, it's life-giving to me to encourage people with sermon. It's life-giving to me to, encourage people as a minister, like, even when they're going through difficulties and challenges, navigating the vicissitudes of life, death, and, all the things that people deal with, like depression, anxiety. Right. But it's a calling where I feel encouraged to do it. So in 2020, after my granddad passed away, I kind of, put a pause on the law school applications, the LSAT preparation, and said, I'm going to divinity school. And, from there, I started researching the various divinity schools. My top three came down to Duke Divinity School in Durham, North Carolina, Emory University in Atlanta, and then Harvard in Massachusetts. But I ultimately chose Duke because it felt like home when I was there.
Over Duke, huh?
Duke over Harvard.
Yes.
So Duke over Harvard because Duke, it really felt like home to me. The program was so welcoming. The Office of Black Church Studies was awesome. And then they gave me a full ride. And then on top of that, I had free housing because I worked in housing and residence life. So that was something that really, I was like, this is definitely God because I got a full ride. I got free housing. All I got to do is show up there and go to class. So I went to Duke and, from my time at Duke, I've just continued to trust in the Lord and just grow. I started serving on staff in Durham at AME Church as a young adult minister. I was preaching pretty much once a month on Young Adult Sunday, and 3 years of preaching once a month. It did wonders for my preaching and ministry. Having the phenomenal professors at Duke Divinity School, the preaching professors like Dr. Luke Powery, who was the professor of homiletics there. He was phenomenal. I just had a great experience at Duke. From the entire staff was able to sit with students from different backgrounds. So I'm Baptist, but I was able to sit down with my Methodist, colleagues. I was able to sit down with, people who are Episcopal, people who were, from all different backgrounds. We had conversations, and it was just so empowering and encouraging to, have these conversations with people from different contexts and see, how I can apply that to the context that I'll be called to serve into. And God is just continuing to move and open doors of opportunity for me. So during my time at Duke, I also interned at Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia, the summer 2024. And, from there, after I graduated from Duke, I got a full-time job offer at Alfred Street. So I've been there since July of 2025. That's when I moved. And I've been there for around seven months now. And I've been able, I actually, funny story, I preached at Alfred Street for, this was the second Sunday of this month, and it wasn't planned. So we have 3 services. We have a Saturday service and 2 on Sunday, so 8 and 11 a.m. So Pastor Howard John Wesley, who's the senior pastor, he preached, that Saturday, and he had gotten sick. So I received a call that I was to preach the 8 and 11 o'clock. So I hadn't planned to do it. That weekend I was just chilling, vibing, enjoying life. I was at the barbershop chilling. I got the call and I was like, well, I got to prepare. Yeah. So I prepared that night. I stayed up till about 4 a.m. because I really just wanted to be faithful to the text and really give someone a word of encouragement. And that Sunday I preached from the subject, I'm Still Here, from the book of Daniel in the Lion's Den, chapter 6, verse 16. And it was a blessed experience. And, Alfred Street continues to, stretch me and allow me to grow in, different areas with teaching, Sunday school, on Sundays to the adult class, doing the senior Bible study, the Seasoned Saints Bible study. I've actually baptized people for the first time last year, so that was just a blessed experience. I preached my first eulogy. That was something. Having a celebration of life for someone, and I just continue to grow there, and I'm so grateful to be there under the leadership of someone like Reverend Dr. Howard John Wesley and the entire ministerial staff who, continues to encourage me even as a young minister, because it's different, being 26 in ministry. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people look at you like, oh, what do you have to say? You haven't lived long enough to, say anything, but people really, really encourage me, even in my youth. But I've been told that I have like an old soul, so I'm 26, but I'm not. People don't think I'm 26 or whatever. So.
You did not preach like you was 26. Yeah. You was preaching like you was about 50 years in the game at that point.
Oh, okay. yeah. So, but it's a blessing, and I'm just so grateful.
Oh, yes. And we're grateful to have you as a guest here on A Word With. And right now, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to A Word With. I'm Clarence Jones, and I'm having a word with here, Reverend Justice Hill. And Reverend Hill, I want to get back to something that you talked about in your sermon, and about injustice. Now, as I was sitting here listening to you, I did not know that you had, you was in the courtrooms and whatnot, and you was hanging around attorneys and stuff. So I think this question, kind of brings everything that you have done together. And you speak about injustice and looking at the climate that is going on here in America under the current administration. It seems like that now, folks is, doors are slamming in the face of some minorities or those, I guess, what they call the underserved community. So my question is, in the face of all these injustices that is going on, how can we keep our faith up, knowing that this administration has another couple of years left here down the pipeline? But how can we keep our faith in God to say that it is all right and it is okay, we'll get through this?
Definitely. So to answer that question, I would say one of the important things is to continue to pray, because prayer still works. But at the same time, it's so powerful to have, boots on the ground, from the church standpoint. For me, I've served in contexts that never simply preached, for the church within the four walls, but, can speak, preaching in a way and doing ministry in a way that is unable to ignore the injustices that we see, with this administration, with everything that is going on in the world. Just continuing to show up and, make our voices heard makes a difference, but also encouraging those who are in these positions of power to, be called back to, what Jesus tells us to care for the least of these, to, clothe those who are naked, and to, give food to those who are unhoused. And, when you're making the decisions, understanding that what you do doesn't simply impact, your community and people in power, but thinking about the single mother who's doing her best to raise 5 kids, or the young person who is trying to make sense of everything that's going on, who sees everything on social media and is really afraid to even, step out in the community, even, being Black, the Black experience and everything that is going on. It's really, discouraging to see the backward steps we're taking. I know in the sermon today, I talked about how in 2008 and in 2012, we had the election of Barack Obama, the first Black president in America. And I was there, in D.C. when he was inaugurated. I was 8 years old at the inauguration. It was freezing cold, and me and my dad were in D.C. I remember it was so cold I was crying. But, even at a young age, I was like, I have to be here. This is history in the making. And it was so empowering. But then, later on in 2016 and 2024, the election of Donald Trump. And I'll truthfully say, as a poli-sci major, I didn't think it was possible. I was like, this is a joke. This ain't gonna happen. And then, we blinked, the news report happened, and then President Trump was elected as the president of the United States. And, even on my college campus, there was so many people, divided. I remember we had this protest, back in undergrad, where we were, sitting on the streets and, blocking off traffic because of everything that was taking place. And, just the boldness that, people will have because of, who's in office, because, they feel they can say whatever and not have any repercussions. I mentioned in the message today that on January 6, 2021, white supremacists stormed the United States Capitol and made it inside. And, we're doing wreaking all kind of havoc upon the Capitol. But, if they were black, they wouldn't have even made it on the first step.
Right.
And just you see the prejudice, you see, the discrimination, but you also see how privilege and excuses continue to be what is shared. Another thing I talked about in the sermon was how excuses are violent. Excuses are evil, and they continue to, make excuses so that, they feel like everything is justified. It was Ta-Nehisi Coates in his book that I'm reading now called Between the World and Me, and he said that good intention historically has been a sleeping pill that has allowed the dream to still be alive. So essentially saying that we had good intention with what we did, that has been used as an excuse. Your good intention does not always result in good impact. Right. And you can have good intention and it negatively impact, so many different people. Like I can't tell you when the first government shutdown happened, how many people I had to pray with and for who, had lost their jobs and were still trying to make ends meet, particularly in the DMV area. It's extremely expensive there because of, this administration and, just the troubles that people are seeing. I think we can't simply look at our own individual experience all the time, because sometimes you don't get the whole story. You don't know, the struggles that people are going through. But I think when we lead, this sounds cliche, but leading with love is such a powerful thing, and standing for justice and standing for truth. But we're in a difficult time now because, like I said, in the message today, many of us as Black people were raised to believe that we always had to be twice as good. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, the book Between the World and Me is blessing me. But Ta-Nehisi Coates said that this idea of always having to be twice as good is us accepting half as much. And, in the message I talked about accepting half as much pay, half as much respect, half as much dignity. And that's troubling. And in the text later on, Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about how this idea of doing twice as good, accepting half as much was really a tactic of fear that was kind of like having a gun to your head, essentially, this mindset. And the reality is, like, that's how people are living day to day. Yeah. Whether you're in corporate America, you're in politics, whether you're in ministry, like so many people are, they might be the face somewhere, but behind the scenes there are people in power making decisions that could heavily impact them. So people are torn. And a part of the text that I didn't mention today, but I'll mention at another time as we go further in the text, Jesus, is talking to the disciples, and he says, "What will it profit? What will it profit a person to gain the whole world but lose their soul?" And today, so many people are making profits off of money but ignoring their soul, and have had this mindset that they're just going to be soulless as long as they can make $1. When I preached at Alfred Street a few weeks ago, I talked about how there are certain politicians who once stood for change for the people, but now only stand for change in their pockets. And that has been a motivating factor for so many. But at the end of the day, like, we have to maintain our morals. And, even, talking to the Voorhees students today, I said that, many of them are going to be called to, high places. They're going to be in rooms of impact. But even when they're in rooms of impact and elevated, I really want them to be encouraged to not lose their morals, not lose their morals with, however high they're called to. In the message, I also talked about this story that one of my friends told me in and it's March Madness going on now. So, he talked about his experience playing in the NIT tournament at St. Louis University. This was, back in the 90s, but they were playing in Madison Square Garden. And you can imagine a college player going to Madison Square Garden. It's historic. Like so much history has happened there. Like it's a beautiful place. And he talked about how he and his teammates were just looking at the bright lights and the grandness of being at Madison Square Garden to the point where they were beginning to get nervous, because the lights are a lot brighter at Madison Square Garden. The stage is a lot bigger. The platform reaches so many more people, but their coach had to remind them that the court is still 94 feet long and 50 feet wide. The rim is still 10 feet high. And then the part that got me was the coach said that the same nail that is at the free throw line in Madison Square Garden is the same nail that is on the free throw line of the court back home. So with that, despite the grandness of Madison Square Garden, it's the same court, it's the same game. You come in with the same vision, the same mindset. So wherever the students are called to, and I know they'll be called to great places, they have to have that same mindset, no matter how big the stage is, no matter how bright the lights are, not becoming, arrogant in their favor. I think that is something that is so important, and I really want to, encourage all the young people just to be confident and grateful for the favor that God has placed on your life, but don't allow that to make you arrogant, where you think you can, look down on people or speak badly of people and do things that so many people have had to experience. So I think people who are accustomed to being oppressed and marginalized, when they get in positions of power, they do the same cycle. But I think when we're called to these platforms and larger rooms and having these the people that we can reach, we have to continue to encourage integrity. We have to continue to encourage having a strong moral compass, but also having humility. Because I know for me, like as a minister, even after preaching engagements, I'm sometimes kind of torn when people say that I've done a great job, because I know that for me, I'm being used as a vessel for God. And, my grandmother, I love her so much. She always would say, even after you have preached a great sermon and done well, when people say that, just tell them to God be the glory and to continue to pray for me. Because if you aren't careful, the affirmation of others can cause you to, get an enhanced sense of yourself and get a big head, get a huge ego. And before you know it, you think that you yourself are God, but that's not the case. Mm-hmm. We as ministers, as preachers, are vessels of God. And I think that is such an important reminder, that we are still imperfect and flawed, that we don't have all of the answers. And, sometimes even in ministry settings, like when people are asking, questions about life, saying the phrase, I don't know, because that's real. Like you can't always make up an answer. Sometimes you have to say, I don't know. And that's so real. But yeah, this is it's just been an awesome time being here, knowing, that a few years ago I was in similar shoes to the Voorhees students, and just seeing how, God continues to move in the life of young Black leaders, Black excellence, Black intelligence. That is so very important. And I think, combating the injustice that we continue to see, it requires us to remember who we are. Remember that. Remember just the efforts that our ancestors had to make to get us to where we are. Like even now in ministry, like I stand on the shoulders of, both of my grandfathers who did ministry for decades. And I was in church there, serving there, and even looking back on the likes of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., looking at the efforts of Thurgood Marshall, looking at the efforts of Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman, like remembering that we come from glorious people who stood up for justice and stood up for change long before we were even thought of. Mm-hmm. And I think when we show up in these spaces, remembering who we are and where we come from, that is so important, because I imagine it can sometimes get easy to, when you get into places, to kind of shrink your light because, so many others are acting immorally and unjust. And whenever you take a stand, people will look at you funny and try to push you down. Again, at the sermon today, one of the key phrases that I hope hit was that with great honor comes great hate. And how, today as young leaders, we can't become addicted to affirmation and applause. And I cited the singer Usher, who said, "When you live for the applause, you'll die by the booze." And while that is so real, and I know everyone wants to be loved and affirmed, but as we continue to continue the good fight of faith, continue to try and take a stand for justice, we have to understand that, sometimes you're going to have to stand and not be applauded by everybody. You're going to have to continue to speak truth, even when everyone around you is lying, even if they, try to ridicule you for standing up. I think, even as a what we learned as kids, like doing what's right. Yeah. And I think, that for some people as they get older, what's right doesn't always seem what's right. Like, it doesn't always seem accepted, and people try to, shrink in that capacity. But I don't think that, we should shrink our morals. We should shrink our voices. We have to continue to, take that stand. And it also starts from a young age, like even in the elementary schools. I remember for me, being like 5 or 6, and my dad, Dr. Edward Hill, who is the provost here at Voorhees, took me to various civil rights museums. Like I saw the Lorraine Motel at like 5 or 6. We had gone to so many different African American history museums. I was taught early on my history, and that that was so important. Like, even we took so many trips to Atlanta, like seeing the Martin Luther King Junior Park historic site, going to Ebenezer and, seeing the Eternal Flame. All that stuff has stuck with me. Like, even going to the inauguration, when I was 8 years old, like I was there. And I think it's so important for us to continue to do that with the up and coming generation, for them to, know who they are, know that know who they come from. Because I think, like, when you know who you are, like, so many, you won't allow people to tell you who you are. Mm-hmm. And, even dating back to, the time of enslavement, one of the ideologies or approaches of the plantation owners was to build the body and destroy the mind. Mm. Pastor Howard John Wesley at Alpha Street often says that the biggest threat to white supremacy is black intelligence. And I think that mindset, that approach, the power of the mind and the power of, who we are, the power of our faith can really continue to lead us through. So, yeah.
And my final question, actually, you took it right out when you opened up to say, yes, Dr. Edward Hill, who is the provost here at Voorhees University, is your father. But I still want to ask this question. What were the things that he instilled to you that you still go about today?
Wow, that is that's a great question. From a young age, like the phrase, this is a Latin phrase, cogito ergo sum, which it translates to, I think, therefore I am. Like, I remember, even as a kid having to, recite this as I was going to preschool, daycare, I think, therefore I am. In a constant phrase, like I had to, recite that I'm a young, strong African-American male, the creator of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Therefore, I soar in these subjects. This was something that I was taught early on. And as I've gotten older, I understand, how, it's important for us to, also, be gentle with ourselves and not always having to get A's thinking that it makes you less intelligent. But like having that mindset as a kid, really encouraged me to, have confidence and courage no matter where I was called to. He also, taught me the importance of, using my voice. Like my dad was the one who who really introduced me to the power of my own voice. I remember at the age of 15, I did my first oratorical contest with the Alpha Phi Alpha chapter in Warner Robins, Georgia, and we had worked on my speech, and I won first place. And he just continued to put me in positions to allow my voice to be heard, because I think he saw something in me from a young age that I wasn't really able to see in myself. But ever since I can remember, it's always been always do your best. Always do what is right, even no matter how difficult it is. Like I remember as a kid, I think I was 5 or 6. I had stolen some gum from CVS, and my parents saw me with the gum, and then my dad was like, "Oh, you're going back to the store. You're going to give it back to him." And even as I was so embarrassed, I literally had to go back to CVS because I stole some gum. But that still stuck with me. Yeah. Like how you have to do what's right, like at all times. So that's some of the things he's taught me. He's taught me how to be a man, how to lead. When you're in leadership positions. He's also shown me what love looks like through work and action. Through providing. The many blessings that I was able to have growing up in life, and seeing him lead so many young black men has really encouraged me. Like even because he started, at least as I can remember, he was at Forest Heights Elementary School. He was teaching, and that's in South Carolina. But he was teaching an all boys class, and it was a class that people didn't think that these boys would accomplish anything in life, but he would always encourage them, and they went from being thought of as not capable to leading their school in grades and so many different things, and seeing the work that he does at various universities. Even before he got at Voorhees, he was at Fort Valley State for a minute as a dean of the College of Education. He was at Texas A&M in Killeen, Texas, Dean of College of Education. He's been to so many different schools, and he's driven by the passion of education and the importance of ensuring that particularly young black students have an education and use that education not only for themselves but for the education of others, and using that to go further, because again, the world can take so much, but they can't take your mind. Right. If you have that education, that foundation, that faith, you always be where God wants you to be. So I'm so grateful for my dad. Often in my sermons, I'll cite different things that he has told me. And one thing I want to share, this story when I was 15 years old. I had just received my driver's permit, and my dad gave me the honor of driving his car to a basketball fundraiser event. And, as we were driving to the event on the main road, I was doing everything right. I was putting on my turn signal. I was stopping at stoplights. I was looking before I changed lane. I was doing everything right. And then from a distance, I caught a glimpse of my teammates at the event, which just so happened to be at a collision center. And, I saw my teammates. I rolled the windows all the way down. I turned the music all the way up. And as we were turning into the lot, my dad was telling me to slow down. But instead of, hitting the brakes, I hit the gas and ran my dad's Lincoln MKX into a pole in front of everybody. So in front of all the basketball moms, the basketball dads, my teammates. I was so embarrassed that day because I was caught up in trying to flex, but then this was a day I wish that I was dreaming, but this is my reality, and I thought I'd never live it down. But the next day, we're at the house, and my dad tells me he wants to speak with me outside. And I'm wondering why he wants to speak with me outside, but in his hands are my mom's car keys, and he's trying to hand them to me. And this whole time, I'm looking at him like he's crazy because I literally just wrecked his car yesterday, and now he's giving me my mom's car keys. And I'm thinking, in a minute, we aren't going to have any cars. And, and I'm also in the back of my mind thinking about the wreck I had yesterday and the embarrassment I felt. But my dad told me something that still sticks with me today. He said, if you allow what happened yesterday to consume your thoughts, you won't ever recover. I need you to take these keys and drive. And that day I took the keys and drove, and I've been driving ever since. And, prayerfully, I stopped by Voorhees today to tell somebody to take the keys and drive to the bright future that they have, drive to chase their dreams, drive to chase their goals, and drive to be all that God has called them to be. So,
you know what? I gotta say, I've been very inspired to have this interview with you here today because you have shown a lot of growth and maturity, and I'm happy to say that I was able to sit and hear you speak today, and to the student body, to the faculty, to the staff, and also to the local community as well. So I want to thank you, Reverend Hill, for joining me here today to have a word with, a nice little word with here, because I hope that everybody out there can get something out of this conversation today as they continue on with their lives.
Yes, sir. And thank you for the opportunity. I'm grateful, and God bless Voorhees. God bless, Denmark, South Carolina. God bless everyone listening, and know that, through it all, God is still here. I know we're continuing to, deal with, injustice and all that's going on, but know that God is still working, God is still present, and God is not done yet.
All right. Thank you so very much. And thank you out there for listening to A Word With. I'm Clarence Jones, and thank you so very much. Continue to listen right here on WVCD 96.5 FM, 790 AM. And until next time, so long, everybody.
That concludes this episode of A Word With. Thank you for listening to WVCD 96.5 FM and 790 AM. To see photos of our guests and stay updated on all things Voorhees, follow us on Instagram at WVCD Radio and at Voorhees University, and on Facebook at Voorhees University 1897. Join the conversation online, and we'll see you in the next one.